Hopefully that helps with the sound a little bit. All right, so let's get the YouTube live stream going. And here it is. Okay, cool. So we're live. We're taking your questions, Q&A for anything related to code or entrepreneurship. Probably going to be related to code, but either one, happy to answer those things. But in the meantime, until we get questions, I'm actually going to jump on the YouTube channel and take a look at some of the latest questions that have been coming up. I'll read them to you, and then we'll go from there. So again, this is a live Q&A, and it's specifically for you guys. So if you do have questions, let us know in the comments below, and we'll go ahead and answer them. If you're on YouTube, we're going to be answering those ones a little bit after the Facebook ones, because I'm looking at YouTube right now for the previous questions. Okay, so cool. So let's see. Can you please make a video on deploying TryDjango 1.9 on Heroku? We actually cover Heroku in a few different projects. We have it on joincfe.com. We also have the Heroku stuff on it's TryDjango. One of the TryDjango ones we actually definitely cover Heroku. So the 1.9 and releasing it, it's very, very similar. Do I have a tutorial on resetting passwords by email using Django? We do cover resetting passwords somewhere. Django All-Auth actually can handle all of that stuff for you. So we have that tutorial on joincfe.com. So definitely check that out. Let's see. So other questions. Again, we're live. We're here answering questions. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to be reviewing all the questions that are on the YouTube channel right now, and that's joincfe.com/YouTube. Let's see. Nothing big as far as the questions are concerned. And no sound. Andre, can you hear me now? Andre on YouTube, can you hear me now? So Greg Owen asks, are there tuts on scraping using Python, more like a skeleton for shoplift or just variants? Not exactly sure what you mean by skeleton for Shopify. So scraping Shopify websites, is that what you're asking, Greg? Great. I'm glad you guys can hear on YouTube. Those of you who are on Facebook, please ask the questions below. YouTube, I'm going to be answering the questions right where you're at. So as far as scraping with Python, yeah, we absolutely have those. If you go to joincfe.com/YouTube or our YouTube channel and look for the coding with Python part, that will actually cover scraping websites with Python. Now, as far as getting like variants, each site is going to be a little different, but more than likely they'll have a field that you could probably scrape as well. I haven't ever actually done that. That's kind of an interesting one to think about. I'm assuming you're trying to get like all the product data and then put that into like a CSV file or something like that. If that's true, Greg, please let me know, and then maybe we can go further down the line there. But as far as scraping websites, anything that's displayed on the web in theory can be scraped. Now, that doesn't mean that it's always easy because of how it might be loaded and the way we scrape, or at least on the tutorial that we have, it doesn't take into account for AJAX loading. So the dynamic asynchronous loading stuff, it doesn't really take into account for those things. So yeah, you want to scrape the products off of Shopify. Going back to that same question from Greg, scrape the products from Shopify and then also get their variants. Yeah, so what I would imagine you could do is using Beautiful Soup and Python request, which is what we cover in Coding with Python, the web scraping one. You would go for all of the inputs that are on there with the different names. You might have to actually see what the class is. Excuse me. You might have to see what the class is to actually find out what the variance would be. But that's a pretty interesting one. Great. Yeah, I really do think so. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, a little tickle. Yeah, so we're live here answering your questions. Facebook, please ask them right there, or you can jump us and join us on YouTube. That's joinsafety.com/YouTube. We're trying to do it at this time of the hour so it kind of reaches another part of the globe. Of course, if you're missing this and you're watching a little bit late, I'm sorry, but we kind of do these at random times, and we're really still trying to figure out exactly how best to do live events for you guys. Any tips on how to use encryption with Base64, the code? So Base64 encryption is quite a long topic. I don't really want to get into it right now, but Base64 is used a lot with encryption, and I feel like there's a YouTube tutorial out there somewhere with Base64 encryption. Sorry that doesn't fully answer your question, but it's a topic that I just don't want to touch right now because there's just so much to it. Cool. Tut Django of your great. Thanks, buddy. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Vikikmehe? Sorry, I'm probably butchering it. I really apologize. If you could tell me how to pronounce your name, I will definitely try to. Intercomp, you're welcome. Of course, absolutely. Greg, definitely happy to help. Any other questions you have, please let me know. I really think that the scraping stuff, if you go through that tutorial, I mean, I did it a while ago, so I don't remember exactly every detail about it, but I think that you could get a lot from that as long as you're testing things out. And I mean, there's definitely other packages that make it easier and easier to actually scrape websites. So that's something else that you could check out. Like Python Scrapey is another one that I've used a little bit, but I actually prefer using the Python requests and Beautiful Soup to actually do the scraping, because those two together work really well. And there's no reason to do something different because those work really well. So guys, we're answering questions, live questions, anything you have about coding, entrepreneurship, or if you want to talk about other stuff. Yeah, whatever you want to talk about, that's what I'm here for, is to answer some questions. Okay, so I want Pro Django. What do I can? Sorry, I don't fully understand that question. VV or VK, I'll just say your last name. I don't fully understand that question, so if you can rephrase it. I'm assuming you're trying to say that you want to get better at Django. So how do you get better at Django, or how do you get better at coding in general? That's just a lot of practice. You pick a project and you try and build it, and hopefully you build something that's of value. You could even build something for somebody. So there's definitely a lot of projects out there that you might be able to reach out to somebody and say, hey, I think I can help you here. I would love to help you, and here's how I'm going to do it. And then that's a really good way to get a lot of practice. And just, I mean, we have a lot of tutorials too, so you could go through all of those, and that's definitely going to help you at least cut the time. Reading documentation, whether it's for Django or any other programming language, actually will help a lot. So like, let's say for instance, you were trying to get a job somewhere, and they're like, oh, well, if you didn't know the answer to something, what would you do? Well, this is where you're at. You don't know the answer to something, so it's like, well, what do you do? Well, you can read the documentation. That's probably like the first thing that you go to. You could also ask Google like certain very specific questions, whether it's related to code or a particular programming language. It's actually really, really an effective way to find answers and get a lot better at it. The other side of it is getting to the point where you're teaching people. So if you start getting better, then you can actually take on somebody and say, hey, I'm going to help you learn how to code. And then that's how you'll also get a lot better, because they'll ask questions that you don't necessarily know. And then you'll have to do some research and then get back to them. And then it will like really start sticking in your brain. But that is something that you will have to cultivate over time. You probably can't like just learn a little bit and then start teaching somebody. There's not going to be a whole lot of value there for either one of you. So there's that. Okay, so let's see. Raymond, I would like you to teach Search Advance, like Elasticsearch or Solr. You want to see an advanced searching function. So we actually have we have quite a few things that do searching inside of on joinsafety.com. I believe our e-commerce project, as well as our matchmaker and digital market project, I think those all go into search to some degree. When you're saying like a more advanced search, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. So if you can clarify what you're trying to do, then I can better point you in the right direction, because web scraping can also be a form of search. Think about like Google's search engine. That's what it did for a very long time. It indexed the web, and then now you can search through their database because it indexed the web. And doing web scraping will allow you to, in theory, index the web on your own too. Yeah, I mean, over enough time, you could probably index the web just like Google. And now, would it be as effective or as good or as used? That's another story. But you definitely could do a lot of the similar sort of concepts as Google did. Cool. So, Lester, let's see. I have learned Django. Trying to pick up Android and iOS programming. Where do I start? Well, so this is a big topic, Lester. I think if you know Django and you know a web topic, I think your next step should actually be learning something like Angular or React. And I'll tell you why. Because Angular and React can be adapted into those both of those platforms as well as web. So if you look at Django as being like kind of your API service, right? So API service being, it kind of controls how it interacts with everything else. So you got websites are one version of a client that would use your Django API. An iOS app or an Android app would be other clients that would use that API as well. So you use Django as your back-end service, basically, that powers all of these other things. Now, if you knew Angular or React, you can actually write one set of code that would work on all those different things while still allowing for this native feel on iOS or Android. And that's thanks to Cordova. Cordova is a library that basically just makes it really easy to deploy your Angular or React code, which is JavaScript, to iOS or Android, which is awesome. It's really, really cool, actually, on how efficient and useful it is. We cover a lot of stuff on RESTful APIs or building your own API service in Django on joincfe.com. So if you just look for the Django REST Framework tag or just search Django REST Framework, you're going to see a ton of stuff related to building this API service that you can then build all your apps on top of. Now, that API service is important, so even if you wanted to learn Swift or Java, Swift or Objective-C both do iOS, Java does Android, you would still want that API service even if you don't go the Angular React route. So really you want to build that API if you're going to plan on building on top of your Django project. That's really important. Really good question, though. I'm really interested in that question and what we see for the next 5, 10, 20 years. Okay, well, wow. So you asked this question next. So what do I think of the future of websites and apps in the next 5, 10, and 20 years? That's really, really interesting. It's really going to be hard to say exactly 10 years because artificial intelligence is going to change so many things. I'm really, really excited about it because it's going to extend our human capabilities so much further. Of course, there are potential downsides to it, but I think realistically what it's going to do is very similar to like what we can do as programmers. We can build an app and it can extend our ideas and thoughts. It's something I love about code, right? Whereas AI is going to be able to do that with all sorts of things, which is really, really interesting. So I think like 10 years, AI is just going to change everything that we do. Now, for the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot more RESTful API services. I've been thinking about this a lot, and what we'll have is like kind of like a cloud layer, and then we'll have a client layer. So the cloud layer being the backend service, and what I'll probably end up doing is running off Django, but unless something drastic changes, it won't be Django. But Amazon Web Services have these Elastic Beanstalk. It's kind of a basically a load balancing service. So if you get hit with a ton of traffic, the service actually scales up exactly to fit that traffic, and that's what makes it that much more powerful to use with Django. And that's kind of the cloud layer, so doing the back end, but also being able to handle any sort of scale. So that's something like if I was you right now, or what I'm working on is building that like sort of scalable model. And what's really nice about it is it's cheap when there's only a few things, but it's not that expensive when there's a lot, right? So if there's a lot of demand, it's not that expensive, but hopefully you're capturing that demand in some way by providing value. That's really the end goal. And now if we talk about that client layer, that is websites, that's an iOS app, that's an Android app, that's a TV app, virtual realities around the corner, and then doing like Internet of Things, right? So these are all like client level. When I say client, I mean like something the user interacts with. So client layer stuff. So we're going to have those two layers, and so much about Coding for Entrepreneurs has been focused on mostly the backend part of the cloud layer, and then not so much the web service part or the load balancing servers. But I do think that we're going to see a big explosion with all that stuff. I mean, just imagine when you can use your web application that's on Amazon Web Services or some cloud service, and you could then tell your toaster to turn on, right? So like that's definitely going to happen. But like we're saying toaster, I mean, there could be so many other things into it, such as like automating growing food, and like, I mean, there's just a lot that's really coming. So sorry, I really went on a tangent there. But the next 5 years, as far as what you would be doing as a developer, is thinking about how all of that's going to interact with this stuff. Automation, I didn't even mention automation, as far as autonomous vehicles or autonomous drones. All of that stuff could be working with the cloud layer. So I see like all of these clients potentially that will be working with your backend service. And of course, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be something where it's for everybody else. It could just be for yourself, right? So like I'm thinking in my house. Here's an example. At my house, what I would do is I would have a website, or excuse me, a backend cloud service, so using Django, to handle every sensor in my house. So in room A, room B, room C, there'd be different sensors in there. That would all work with my cloud layer service, right? So, and I could do this individually right now. And all these things can work together, monitor everything that I would ever want to monitor. Someone knocks, rings a doorbell or whatever, my webcam turns on, and all that's being recorded back into my cloud service. And all of this is just for me. Nobody else uses it except for me. That stuff, we will definitely start seeing a lot more of that. And as a developer, the things that you could do individually are just going to be so huge, because like Coding for Entrepreneurs is like one of many different services that teach you how to put things into action to make this stuff happen. So the next 5, 10, 20 years is really exciting. I could go on forever. Thanks for asking that question, Lester. I am happy to continue if you guys want to hear more about that. But I realize I kind of really went on a tangent on that one. So Rakesh asks about any tutorials for Django channels. Django channels is definitely something we're really interested in doing. So like WebSockets and real-time apps and stuff like that. I'm kind of waiting to see how it gets integrated. So Django channels is actually going to be integrated into Django 1.10, and then we'll do some research on that. Once we do more research on it, then we'll kind of make the decision on how it's going to be integrated into our lessons, because it might be a very fundamental thing, or it might be just an add-ons thing. That will become a lot more clear in the next few months. Sorry, that's not a full exact answer, but we always research all types of libraries and code for you guys, so we can eventually have better service. That's the goal. I mean, that's why it's a monthly service. It's like it keeps us committed to providing value for you guys on Join CFE. On YouTube, for example, it's just all about providing value and getting you guys hopefully excited about coding and bringing it to the next level. Again, I went a little bit of a tangent. This is what I'm doing. I'm just doing a tangent tonight. Okay, so let's see. The next question: how would one code a Google search in an iOS app? So you want to execute a Google search in an iOS app and then return the search results. I'm not sure if the API allows for that. If it does, then you could look up Google's search API and see how they actually have it, because they probably have a search API. I haven't worked with it myself, but it would basically work like a lot like the web scraping thing, where you just kind of input a website or a query, and then it'll work exactly like the Google search. You input a query, and then it will return some responses to you, probably in like JSON format, which is JavaScript object notation for those of you who don't know. And then you would be able to parse that data and return it to your users. That's something that I think you'd probably have to look into their documentation more specifically. I don't know if they do that though, because they want control of that search completely, right? All their ad revenue is what makes them everything. So Not positive you could do it to the degree where it return a JSON response, but what you could do is probably put a web view in an iOS app, which is basically like a web page, and then embed their search there. They do that on websites. You've probably seen it on websites, a Google search on websites, but then it would render the way they want it to. I think that's probably what you'd have to do. Any advice on finding a job? Jeff, I think this is a good question, and it really depends on what you're looking to do. So, like, if you're trying to find a job in coding, let's just say that's what you're looking for, and you have some skill on how to do it, well, I wouldn't suggest that you go after the most popular places to get a job. What I would suggest you do is build your skill at a place that will pay you and realize that you'll like learn as you go, right? They'll understand what your skill level is possibly, and I'll explain why they'll understand what your skill level is possibly, but they'll understand that and then they'll pay you accordingly, and then that would be a great time to be paid to so earn money while you learn and craft your skill and get better and better. So then from there, then you can start thinking about how to transition to another job or a better job. So as far as proving your value or showing like what you know, you can pick like 100, let's say 20 companies. Pick 20 companies, identify 5 of them that you think you can actually help them with their website or web app, and actually help them actually do it. Like, obviously you need a job to like pay for things on a daily basis. So depending on where you are, maybe you drive for Uber during the day or at night, and then the other times you're like just literally coding and building these free sort of services for these different companies, and like just offering it to them, saying, look, this is what I built for you, this is what I saw, I'm really interested in working here, I'm very passionate about what I'm doing, and I think I can really help you guys out, so I think it'd be a really nice relationship for us to work together, and boom, that might actually foster a job. It might not work right away. It might take 10 or 15 or 20 companies, but if you went through 10 or 15, 20 companies, you could definitely start freelancing, most likely, if you're doing what I just said, where you're building an app and you're actually doing something real, then you're much more likely to get a job. And on the other side of it, so many ways to freelance online, so many things that you can do. So like there's Fiverr.com, you can do like just very basic logo design, which you basically open up Adobe Illustrator and you can send that to people. Like, it's not that big of a deal. You can also do like Elance.com or Upwork.com is what it's called now. So you could do all other things like typing, or if you know another language, you can transcribe things, all sorts of stuff you can do in the meantime while you're trying to find that ideal job. Hopefully that helps. Let's see, the next one, Surab. Sorry, I'm really bad at pronouncing names. Any tutorials on AngularJS? It's funny you should ask. It's definitely something I'm very, very interested in doing. Don't have any yet, but it's definitely something I'm very interested in. I think AngularJS is really cool. Okay. I want to see you make a tutorial on a live Django website, including setting up a production web server and getting it all going. So I actually have quite a few of those. So Launch with Code is one. Try Django 1.8 also. So Try Django Launch with Code and Try Django 1.8 both go live. Production, everything. One's on Webfaction, one's on Heroku. And then on codingforentrepreneurs.com or joincfv.com, we do Elastic Beanstalk and another Heroku one as well. So we definitely cover that quite a bit. If you mean having me do it live like this, that's a whole nother thing. I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that quite yet. It's just not the right setting, because like when I record these things, I like having it done a certain way, and if I was having questions constantly, it would just distract me, and I wouldn't be able to provide value for you guys in any sort of meaningful way. Cool. What should be the best way to... oh, wait. Sorry, I skipped Shannon. Yeah, Shannon. Have you had a chance to play around with the new version of Angular? What do you think about it? So I'm assuming, Shannon, you're referring to Angular 2, not like a new version of AngularJS, which is, I think, 1.5 now. Angular 2 is interesting. I think there's still some bugs that they need to work out. It's definitely quite a shift. So I I don't know. I really like AngularJS a lot. Angular 2, I think probably improves on a lot of the AngularJS stuff. So I have played around with it a little bit, and I do think that the Angular team is probably very committed to Angular 2. So that's probably what we'll see very soon. I hope it doesn't turn into a Python 2 and Python 3 type of thing where, Python 2 is like still very widely used. Python 3 is also very widely used, but both versions are still out there in the wild. So hopefully it doesn't turn into anything like that because of that dramatic departure. It might end up doing that. We'll see. Only time will tell there. Yash, what should be the best way to integrate AngularJS with Django? Kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but basically you're going to want to make a RESTful API service with Django using the Django REST framework probably. And I do that on joincfe.com as well as the blog API on YouTube. And then from there you just use those APIs into AngularJS. So without getting too much into Angular, basically you'd be using the JSON data and having requests from Angular to the blog API. That's pretty much how you do it. Any tutorials for Backbone.js? No, and probably not planning on doing Backbone.js, to be honest with you. There's definitely a good number out there, but I just went in this whole thing about where the future is going and where I think I'm going to be spending a lot of time, and Backbone just doesn't exactly fit into that in my mind at this time. Other people would definitely agree with me or disagree with me, and some people will agree with me on that, but it's not something we're planning on doing. Thanks for the question, though. Really appreciate it. Okay, so most people think that not only will interactions become more modular and customizable, but much of it will be in the cloud or on the cloud. Yeah, I think so. Interactions, I'm assuming you mean like all kinds of interactions, so not just like digital interactions like what we're doing right now, but also like sort of physical interactions. Like if we shook hands, like our clothes would recognize who we are, and then it would be somewhere in the cloud. Yeah, I think we're going to see that a lot. And I think that's what I was talking about earlier with building your own personal cloud layer, whether it's for you or your company or your website or whatever. Like that is something that I think all of you guys should be researching if you're interested in cloud-based technology or what the future that is coming. Let's see. Next question. The cloud, a nice name for someone else's computer. Yeah, I mean, in a way, yes, but in another way, if you actually owned a set of servers, then they would be your computer and they'd still be considered the cloud. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but like leveraging Amazon's platform just makes it so much easier for you as a developer, so you don't have to get into the IT side of like handling servers. I don't know. It's not something I'm really interested in personally. But I know there's a lot of people that love doing that, and a lot of those people work at Amazon and Amazon Web Services. So, yeah, I am a huge fan of renting all around. I actually think we're going to see a lot more things being rented. Like the other day, I needed a ladder, like, a stepping ladder. But I didn't need one that goes 8 feet. I needed one that went 20 feet. And I literally had to go to the store, buy one, and return it, like, after I used it, because I needed it one time. Like something like that, there's got to be like some sort of Uber for that. Perhaps one of my friends have one, and I could have, hit up every single person I knew, but it was just so much easier to just go to the store and buy one and then return it. But the thing that I paid for was my time. Like I spent a lot of time doing it. Where if I could hail one, anything like a ladder or a saw or a hammer, maybe not a hammer, but like any sort of thing, you might be renting a lot more things in the future. That's kind of what I think. Like freedom is like not having a bunch of stuff with you. That's also what I think. Cool. Lester, thanks for your answers. Really appreciate them, brother. In business, typically as a tech startup, are you advocating bootstrapping when you teach coding? An advocate of bootstrapping. So, and then a follow-up question, when do you think is a good time to get some funding? Okay, so first of all, if you're trying to start a business and you're trying to start a code-based business, so a web-based business, I don't see any reason why you should need funding, right? There might be, at least at first, there might be a threshold, and you'll know it when you reach it. Like you'll really know it. There will be a threshold that you need to get funding, and you'll have a lot of attention right? So like 37 Signals, the guys that wrote the book Rework, very, very good book about this topic in particular. Too, it doesn't talk about just this, but all sorts of things. If you need to get funding for an idea, it's probably not that solid of a business, right? Like you might be able to convince somebody to give you money, but until you actually put your idea into action, like if you build a product and bring it into the market's going to tell you whether or not it's good. And then from there, you can kind of decide whether or not you want to actually fund or get more funding or put more time into it. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate of bootstrapping. I think there's another book called The $100 Startup, that also very good, by Chris Gilbo. So those two books talk about this quite a bit on bootstrapping and really not spending like a ton of money or time getting your business going. There's another really cool event called Startup Weekend where I'm not sure if it's open to the general public. I think it is. It definitely was for college students, where you could go there as like a business person and also an engineer, and then everyone kind of works on business ideas and then actually starts to execute them at that weekend. But as far as like, if you know how to code, there should be no reason that you should like actually get funding. If you're doing it for a salary, that's the wrong reason. And then you're going to be beholden to somebody else. It's kind of like, then you're not really starting a business. Somebody else is starting the business and you're working for them. And that is something that I just don't think I would want to do. Now, as far as like fundraising, or when you would actually need to start doing fundraising, that in particular is going to happen. Like if you start pitching this or telling people, oh yeah, like I have this business and we have 100,000 users, active users every day. That's going to grab the attention of a lot of people, and then a lot of people will start talking, and then investors will start knocking on your door, and then you can start making that decision, because these investors, they want to get in on the next thing. They don't want to miss out. So a lot of them will look for that very, very early like sort of thing. Very good question. Thanks for asking that. And let me know if you want me to elaborate more on that, because it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. I don't think that you need outside funding at all. I don't think that's how you should start in any business, period. Like, yeah. I mean, if you're Elon Musk, then it's maybe a little bit different, but that's not the reality for most of us. Okay, so they do allow you to use the Google Search API. Oh, cool. So this is going back to that earlier one. They have a Google Search API that you can use, and you can use it for location services within the iOS. Awesome. That's great. I'm very interested to see what that would look like. Yeah, I wonder if you could shoot a URL for us. Yeah. So Adam, what's up, dude? Is asking a question: is freelance web developing a dying field? Absolutely not. It is going to be a hugely growing field going forward. It's going to continue to do just like that. Now, the biggest potential for it to be a dying field is if AI can take over, and that we have yet to see. So until that happens, it's going to continue to do that. The demand for it is like that. So earlier in the talk, we were talking about like where this automation and stuff is going to go in the next 5-10 years. So maybe if you went back to the beginning of this, because it should be recorded. So thanks for the question, buddy. And let's see. So Jazzband, what is the most prospective Python web framework? Prospective Python web framework. Do you mean respected? I'm not sure what you mean by perspective. What Python web framework? Please elaborate. I think Django is the most popular. Flask is the other one. I don't even use it, so I don't know that much about it. But I really like Django. I think Django's a really good Python web framework. Okay, let's see. Do upload this live stream somewhere for future references. Lester, it will absolutely be on our channel, as well as our Facebook. So it's also on Facebook right now. So joincfe.com/Facebook is going to be there. joincfe.com/YouTube. It's going to be there as well. Thank you for that comment. So Django could add socket as PHP. I want a web server bot, Git, and Connect client. Thank you for that contribution there, buddy. Okay, so Django iOS free, please. Ha ha ha. Nelson, yeah. Well, iOS is going to have probably a big shift on Monday, so that is one of those things that we will see. Um, every year, more and more people are switching to Python 3. I'm assuming you mean. Yeah, absolutely. Naceros. I think that a lot of people are switching to Python 3, and eventually we'll all get there. Hopefully, Python 4 just unites everybody, and that's what happens if they ever come out with it, or when they do. I don't know anything about it, so if you do, please tell me. That would be awesome. Django and Go. I'm not sure what you're telling me there. Are you talking about Go, the programming language, or what? Okay, so Shannon, glad that our views are very similar. That's awesome. Yeah, Amazon Web Services S3 is pretty nice, but also Elastic Beanstalk and their load balancing service for their servers as well is really good. Or Elastic Beanstalk handles a lot of that stuff for you. So Shannon, here in Phoenix, we have a couple of tool libraries. Google it for local area. You may be surprised. Tool libraries, like for rentals. Gotcha. Do they deliver it to you? Do they do something like Uber? Food is doing that, and do they deliver it and then pick it up? And is it expensive or is it cheap? That's something like that. We'll see a lot more stuff. So I got a question from Adam on Facebook. Adam, this is over on YouTube. This is where most of the questions are coming in. So join cfe.com/YouTube. The live stream there is where all these questions are coming in. So if you guys have more questions on Facebook, please let us know. But YouTube's the one that's blowing up. I think it might be a little late for the Facebook audience. Okay, so let's go back into these questions. Where are we? Sorry, it keeps scrolling down automatically for some reason. Can we use Django 1.9 with your e-commerce 2 project? Great question. With all of our projects, stick with the version that's in the video so you can complete the video. Once you complete it and you understand it and you can understand the code, then you can upgrade it. Very simple, easy to do. So that being said, is do e-commerce 2 in the version. I think it's 1.8. I'm pretty sure it is. 1.8 is also going to be supported longer than 1.9. That's another thing. But once you've completed through the version, then you can upgrade and fix all the errors as you might need, because you'll probably run into some glitches or errors that you have to fix based on slight differences in the versions, and you might have to refer to the documentation on what those slight changes are. But a lot of times they'll give you really good warnings when it's something that's no longer supported in that particular version. Sorry, so I went back one. Okay, so do we need an MVC framework when developing Django projects? So Model View Controller Framework. Django is an MVC framework, actually. So, yes. Okay, I have a great idea, at least according to me, but I think Android development is really complicated. Is it? And you're a college student. So, do you know Java? If you know Java, it's a lot easier. If you don't know Java, it's gonna be challenging. But earlier in this talk, I said that if you learn Django as a backend service and then Angular or React, that can build your Android application with using just Angular or React for the front end part of it, which I think is the way to go. So unless there's some like complicated things that you really need, like gaming, I'm not positive if you use Angular or React. That's actually something I'm very interested in knowing. You probably wouldn't. You'd probably use the native SDK, so like using Java with the Android development. But it definitely can be complicated, especially if you don't know Java. Yeah. Okay, so scroll down again for some reason. What about funding for our initial marketing and execution implementation? So, Lester, this is a great question. So funding, like as an investor, well, there's this little thing called, well, it's not that little, Indiegogo, Kickstarter. Those things can really help your initial funding efforts, especially if you're a developer and you have a good idea and you can prove some traction with it, like you have a prototype, something they can work with. You can throw it on there and it'll do two things. It will raise money for you and it will do marketing for you. I actually have had success with Kickstarter for Coding for Entrepreneurs, actually. So when I first started out, I was like, hey, got some traction. This is a cool thing. I'm going to throw it on Kickstarter and see how it does. And it turned out it did pretty well. So that is something that you absolutely can do once you have some more traction with it. And then again, like back on the knocking on the door thing from investors, having a successful Kickstarter is going to give you that much more leverage when you're trying to raise funds, if you do try to raise funds. So there's that too. Okay, Nurkos, or Nasiros, I think that's what I said before. Dude, software development, including web development, will be one of the biggest careers in the foreseeable future. Robots and computers will be in everything. Yeah, I totally agree with you. The software development will absolutely be in so many things, and there's such a huge demand for it. But I do want to emphasize that if you become a software developer, you should definitely get better at a lot of other things too. So like learning how to communicate and sell your ideas, that's also very, very important to build a long-term career that you have influence over. I think those things are something that a lot of developers don't cultivate. I'm lucky because I turned into a developer. I didn't start that way. I was always very interested in technology, but yeah, like for a very long time, entrepreneurship was just everything that I was super passionate about. And then it just so happened that coding was the way to get me there. And initially, I struggled. Coding was hard, and then I slowly started to learn it, and then all the knowledge started stacking, and then I started teaching these courses, and I've just like grown so much in the past few years with coding specifically. So that being said, when it comes to developing your career, it's great to focus and be really good at one area, but you definitely want to still get good in other areas so you're more valuable to any given organization or group of people. Yeah. Okay, so next question. Let's see. Android Dev, you can use Framework Qt is the best. Okay, cool. Thanks for that contribution. Not familiar with the Framework Qt, but maybe something to look at for people that are looking at Android development. What type of projects would you recommend for a beginner to intermediate Python learners? So we're in the process of releasing 30 days of Python. I believe there's 6 days already released on joincfe.com. That's not on YouTube yet, but it will be coming to YouTube. But it is definitely on joincfe.com. And you can actually start there with some beginner sort of courses. It's going to go through a lot of the basics initially. Other than that, we also have coding with Python right on YouTube. That's kind of beginner intermediate because, well, we go step by step. So even if you're a beginner, it's going to show you exactly what to do. And if you do it like 3 times, you probably will really understand it, or at least you can have a basis to play around with. So there's that. Cool. Like I don't know how much work it would be to learn and build a optimized fast app. It seems quite complicated. I know C# or C++ and Python quite well. So you know C++ and Python quite well, but you don't know how much work it'd be to learn and build an optimized fast app. What are you trying to build exactly, Mahir? That's interesting. Yeah, Go programming. Do you think it's a good combination? I actually haven't used Go programming. Like with Django, I don't think that they need to be used together. That's a question that you might consider putting on Stack Overflow or on Quora, just like question answer. That might get a lot of responses there. Because like I said, I don't use Go. I've heard some good things about it, but as far as Google's programming languages, I think that AngularJS is their best thing that they've brought out, personally. Angular 2 is like definitely on the cusp there. Or Android, a lot of people love Android, but Angular I think is like just more like universally awesome. Okay, so I just took a class in functional programming at your college in Clojure. A lot of people seem very much for it, and a lot of OOP code, functional programming, easy to debug. Netflix has changed code, functional language. Yeah, that's a big one to go into. I don't really want to touch it right now, to be honest with you, Mahir. I think MVC OPE and MVC, there's benefits to each one, and it's like an ongoing debate that I just don't want to throw my hat in the ring right now. But thanks for asking that question. I think it's an interesting thing to think about, and it might be that might be another really good one for Stack Overflow to see what other developers say. We got another question on Facebook. Do you know anything about desktop apps with Python? How can I integrate Electron Framework with Python? Would be great to know. Not familiar with Electron Framework itself. I'm very curious. Actually, can you remind me what Electron Framework is real quick? I mean, I could look it up, but I'm trying to answer the questions. If you remind me in the Facebook, Rahul, then I can like better answer that question for you. Okay, so let's see. C++ is the best for hacking. Okay, interesting. Thanks for sharing. I've heard Python is one of the best too, but either way. Guys, hit me up on Google+. I want partners for building learning projects. Preface Django. Oh, somebody asked me about ServeUp. Let me go back up. When is ServeUp going to be up? ServeUp.com. It's getting close, Adam. Thanks for asking, and thanks for remembering. Wow, did you see it before? Oh wait, I guess these are recorded. So ServeUp.com is coming. So if you want to know more about it, definitely go to ServeUp.com and enter your email in. We will have it out hopefully soon. There's been some coding snags because it's the level of what I think it needs to be out of the gates is what's kind of pushing it sometimes. So hopefully soon. Thanks for asking, Adam. Really appreciate it. Okay, so how good is Django when it comes to asynchronous, or should I learn something like Node.js for it? Django is awesome with asynchronous. That's what you'd use a RESTful API for. So Django REST Framework can help you with asynchronous. Your front-end service is the part that's going to do the asynchronous stuff. So you don't need to know Node.js. You would instead want to learn something like React or Angular. You can also use like you can use a lot of things as far as like asynchronous stuff. So there's definitely a lot there. And as somebody said, Python 3 is good at async. You can also use Celery tasks to help with your asynchronous loading stuff. Celery is pretty cool. It's a Python library, but I believe it's just for Django, but it's still a Python library. James, you are very welcome for the answer, and I'm glad you find this information good. I'm happy about that. Okay, so Electron Framework is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for creating a desktop app. Node.js is powerful. Oh, the Atom editor. Okay, yeah. I think GitHub made this. So what you would do to integrate those is with the JavaScript, you would have API calls that go to your Django project, right? So it's not necessarily directly Python. All kinds of Python could work that way, but basically your Django web app would interact with your client, which is the Electron Framework. I do remember it now that you're saying this, but HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, what you're saying there is very similar to the Angular and JS stuff. So realistically, and this goes back to something I talked about before, is you would probably build your Angular JS or React service on top of your API, and then you could deploy it on desktop, on mobile, and probably a few other places. So it's the same universal experience. And I'm not positive, but I think that Cordova has a desktop version, or there's some sort of desktop version for Angular. And honestly, even Electron might be able to use Angular as well. So that's something that I would check out if I was you, to see if Angular and Electron work, or React and Electron work, because it probably does. And then you just build an API service, and boom, you can now have a desktop app. Of course, that sounds a lot easier than it is. So, yeah. But that's generally what it is. So hopefully that answers your question. Looks like it did. Cool. Let's see. I'm here talking about Android. Sorry for not making that clear. Anyways, go to the next question. Q&A. Loving this Q&A. Thanks. Appreciate it. I'm having a good time too. You guys are asking really good questions. I know I'm very repetitive. I'm repetitive in life. It's just how I am. So I'm happy to repeat my answers over and over, even though I like to also tell you to watch the beginning. And what do I prefer, Raul? So Rahul, excuse me, Rahul. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. Please tell me if I am. So what would I prefer? I talked about this at the very beginning. So do I prefer? I think you should build a RESTful API. Going forward, you should build a RESTful API and then build an Angular or React app on top of that, or both. You can literally build both. But building that API is the most important thing. Like everything in the future of coding for entrepreneurs is going to be about building an API. And PySide, Kiwi. No, I would say Electron is probably better than those. That's my opinion right out of the gates. Those like take a lot more. Sorry guys, sorry for everybody else. So he's saying PySide, PyQt, or Kiwi. These are all Python services or Python frameworks that allow you to build desktop apps and also mobile apps. So like native ones that compile into actually being able to be installed on those systems. I don't think that you should build a native app in Python. I think there's a lot of fundamental flaws to doing that, at least out of the gates. If you're really, really good at Python, then absolutely do that. It'd be crazy not to. But if you're more of like, you know Django and you know web frameworks pretty well, but you don't know like all the ins and outs of Python and how you can build like graphical user interfaces with Python, then I would definitely stick with Angular and the Electron framework. That sounds like a really good choice. Okay, back to some other questions. When did I start learning programming? Well, it started with Flash and ActionScript 2.0, or maybe it was even 1 point something. So that was like over 10 years ago. At the time, I didn't actually realize that I was learning programming. I just thought I was making a Flash app, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm making Flash. So I learned then. That also taught me about video editing, which is kind of cool. That was something that was cool about Flash, is how it worked. It worked very similar to a movie. Or editing a movie, but then you could use software to code stuff into it, which is pretty interesting. I wonder if they're ever going to bring something like that back, but for like YouTube videos or something. That probably already exists, or it's probably out there in some form. So when did I start learning Django? That was probably late 2010, so 6 years or so. Whatever version 1.4, whenever that was out. That's when I first started learning Django. That might have been 2011. I don't know. But as far as like when I first, from the time between ActionScript and Django, I played with WordPress a lot, so I kind of knew some PHP, but I was really just kind of hacking around. Didn't know it that well. Definitely couldn't build anything with it. I could only just modify the code in WordPress. And then I've known HTML and CSS since I was about 15, I think. Really rudimentary stuff, but still knew it. Hopefully that answers your question. I don't consider HTML and CSS like programming. It's a markup language. I think most people would agree with that. Cool. Saros, you're off to watch Try Django 1.8. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. See you later, man. Adam Smith, are your classes easy to learn for a non-technical person? Yeah, so I've made them for non-technical people. That's why I go step by step. I don't assume that you know anything. So trying to be as little biased as possible. There's a chance that I go fast for most non-technical, which is why in our videos you can adjust the speed. But it's also why you can rewatch everything. So if you want to get an idea of what it's like, you can check out Try Django 1.8 on our YouTube channel and jump in there, because that's not, that's about the speed that we're going to go. You can also check out 30 Days of Python. So that's going to be our Python introduction tutorial. That's on joincfd.com. To get an idea of like my flow and my pacing and all that. It's probably very similar to this conversation we're having right now. Although this is a conversation, so it's not quite like learning. But I definitely go step by step on everything. And I'm a huge fan of having you guys watch it, rewatch it like 100 times if you have to. Because initially you might have a lot of fun doing it because things are clicking, it's going well. And then you're going to hit a wall and it's going to suck. And then it's going to suck. and then you're gonna just keep going, and then it's gonna get good again, and then you're gonna hit another wall, and it's gonna suck. Like that sort of stuff happens all the time, and it does with me too. Like, I mean, whenever I want to learn something new, I know that there's that curve that's like kind of go up and down and up and down, and then going forward. So that's something else that you want to consider. But I mean, I've had a lot of people say that it's their favorite way to learn how to code. So yeah, I mean that was always the goal, is to make it for non-technical people. As the students that I have get a little bit more like advanced, the level of the classes get a little bit more advanced as well. Rahul, is that right? Rahul. Okay, Rahul, back to you on Facebook. I am working on build a cross-platform app which integrates 3D software, most likely Modo or Blender. That's what I'm curious to know. Oh, sorry, I don't have an answer for you there. That is definitely a good question for Stack Overflow. Like, give as much detail as you can there. But you probably, like, as far as storing the data, you can definitely use Django and a RESTful API service, or pretty much any RESTful API service. You could probably do that. So he's talking about just a little bit more advanced stuff and building a platform for that. Rahul, hopefully that helps answer your question. But something like that, other developers that might have gone through that or have thought through that would be able to answer that better for you. And I don't want to give you the wrong advice there, especially with how complicated or what you're going into. Cool. Where do I begin Angular plus Django? Are you planning on releasing any tuts soon? Babek, thanks for that question. I kind of addressed this earlier, but basically, very interested in Angular. As far as the Django side of it, you want to build an API service. So we have a RESTful API, blog API. That's what we have on our YouTube channel, but we also have other Django REST framework stuff on joincfe.com. So that's where you're going to want to start the Django side. The Angular side, there's probably some tutorials out there that you can just jump into and check out. But it is something we're really interested in doing. And if you go to joincfe.com/suggest, excuse me, joincfe.com/suggest, you can actually upvote the Angular part of that, but it requires a free account to do that, because we take those very, very seriously. Adam Smith, Sarab, I think that's your name. They are pretty easy to learn. I'm the most non-technical person, and yet I didn't have much difficulty learning it. Hopefully Sarab's referring to Coding for Entrepreneurs. I'm not positive, so yeah, that'd be really cool if it was. But either way, I think that, like, if you are non-technical, we all start that way. It's just going through that curve, you know. Here at my internship, I'm using Ruby on Rails exclusively. They have a huge code base, and now that I see that you need to use JS, jQuery, Rails all together to do something really good, it stumps me because I don't know many portions, recommendations to do this fast and well. Just really start doing it. I'm not quite sure if jQuery is the right move to learn, but if your job requires you to do it, then yeah, you definitely can. I would say, like, any sort of project, just like, oh, what do I need to do, and just do as best you possibly can to do it, and then scrape it, do it all over again. So build an API, work with some jQuery stuff, and this is true with Ruby on Rails as well. It's Django. Build an API, and then build on top of it, and then scrape it. Build an API, build on top of it, scrape it. Do the CRUD stuff. So create, retrieve, update, delete. Do all that, get that down, and then everything else will start to fall into place. Get it down on your API as well as on your client side or your JavaScript stuff. What are the negatives of using Django? I mean, in comparison to what exactly? Because there's a lot of huge upsides to it. Rasik, please let me know what you think about that. What kind of projects can I make with Redis as a database? And do you recommend a NoSQL database instead of a MySQL database or an SQL database? And thank you for your last answer. You're very welcome. So Redis, I don't believe you can use as your standard database. I think you use it in junction with your database. So NoSQL or an SQL database. I think they both have their pluses and minuses, and I think everyone's kind of like not fully on the same page with that. So there's definitely articles out there that you can read about all of those questions. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer there. I use SQL databases all the time, and I have no problems with them. But I think that the database question is like much of a bigger topic once you get scale. So once you get really big, what database do you use? And also if you're doing machine learning and big data analysis. Yeah. Okay, so this is gonna be. I'm gonna take like maybe 2 more questions, probably. Yeah, I'm gonna take 2 more questions, 3 more questions because there's 2 pending. Okay, so do I think coding boot camps are a good way to get a job? I've been reading recently that coding boot camps are highly saturated, so tech companies are going away from hiring boot campers. Well, it definitely can be a good way to get a job. Like I don't have experience with that myself, but so could learning a bunch of code online and then eventually like building your own projects and showing potential employers that, I mean, you could do that all day long, like a lot, right? So the boot camp might be really good for like intense getting a lot better, but after you're done with the boot camp, you're still gonna have to learn a lot, and or at least reiterate what you learned in the boot camp. I know this just because 6 weeks or 8 weeks is not really that much time to really learn and get into a full developer mode. It's probably a really good start, but I can't say that that it's gonna be the best way to get a job. If you go back earlier in this live stream, once it's recorded and uploaded on our channel, you can actually see what I talked about with jobs in particular. It was earlier on, so it's probably like maybe 10 or 15 minutes into it. So there's that. Hopefully that answers your question. Which database is the best to use with Django? Currently using MySQL with Rails, and migration rollbacks are a bitch. MySQL I think is pretty solid. There's a lot of MongoDB talk of using MongoDB. PostgreSQL, that's another one. It's hard to give you an answer there. Sorry. There's just a lot of pluses and minuses about all of them, and that's really not something I'm going to go into right now. Okay, so I'm literally gonna take maybe one more question, but this will probably be the last one. Good morning, at Adanas. Hopefully that's your name. Adanas, would you explain the translation of Django and places where Django needs special stuff to run Cyrillic? I don't use Cyrillic, so I don't have an answer there. Translation of Django, you mean Django Translate? Yeah, I think that Django Translate, we have a guide on GitHub, so joincfe.com/guides. We also go to Django Translation on joincfe.com, so videos to actually show you how to do it. When you're saying explain translation of Django, I'm assuming you mean the text that Django will actually render. All of that stuff is fairly straightforward. It basically takes the text that you have, puts that text into a document that you can then translate for any given language. So you are actually the one translating it. Django is not doing it because we don't have AI machine learning stuff yet inside of Django to do the translation for us. Mahir, last question. Can I access all of your content for free? Hopefully this helps you advertise at the end as well. You mean joining Coding for Entrepreneurs? Can you have you can have all of the YouTube content for free? Absolutely. Or at least on the Coding Entrepreneurs channel. So joincv.com/YouTube, you can have all of that stuff for free, and it will always be for free for you, Mahir. Can you access all of our content for free? I think you probably know the answer to that one, so I'm not even going to touch it. Rahul on Facebook. Yes, we talked about Django channels earlier in the stream, so definitely check that out when we're done here. Here, yeah. Okay, cool. Hey, thanks so much, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the questions. A lot of really good ones. If you liked this, please thumbs up or whatever, and to let me know if you want to see another one anytime soon. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Fuck.